So get this. What if I told you one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world was built on an idea that discovering new drugs was actually a bad business decision? It sounds completely backward, right? Well, let's dive into this wild story. This was the core belief of the company's CEO. And no, that is not a misquote. It's not taken out of context. The actual guiding principle was that research and development, the one thing we all assume drug companies are supposed to do, was a complete and total waste of money. And here's the absolutely crazy part. This anti-science philosophy didn't lead to failure, oh no. It led to this, a staggering $90 billion valuation. For a little while, this was the most valuable company in all of Canada. How on earth is that even possible? The company at the very heart of the story is Valeant Pharmaceuticals, and they built an absolute empire, not by creating cures, but by exploiting a massive weakness in the American healthcare system. And their strategy? It was both brutally simple and, for a time, shockingly effective. So what exactly was this revolutionary idea? Well, it was pitched as a brand new, super efficient way to run a drug company. They called it the Pharma Company. And it was all led by these two men. On one side, you had Mike Pearson. He was the CEO who actually executed the vision. And on the other, you had his biggest champion on Wall Street, the hedge fund billionaire Bill Ackman, who sold this whole story to investors as the absolute future of the industry. So what was their playbook? Well, I can tell you it didn't involve any labs or scientists in white coats. Nope. It was a purely financial model designed to extract unbelievable amounts of money from drugs that already existed. It was a pretty simple three-step process. First, they go out and buy up smaller companies that owned older drugs, the ones with very little competition. Second, and this is true to their philosophy, they'd fire the entire R&D department. And third, they would just skyrocket the prices of those drugs overnight. And I'm not talking about a 10% hike. We're talking 500%, 1,000%, sometimes even more. Just take a look at the life-saving heart medication Isoprel. After Valeant got their hands on it, they jacked up the price by over 800%. And remember, there was no new research, no improvement to the drug at all. It was just a new astronomical price tag for the exact same pill. Okay, so this raises a huge question, right? How did they get away with it? You can't just raise a price by 800% and expect insurance companies to just roll over and pay. This is where the story turns from, let's say, aggressive business to outright fraud, all thanks to a very powerful secret weapon. This brings us to the most important question of all. How did they manage to bypass the entire system that's designed to prevent this exact kind of price gouging? I mean, insurers and pharmacists should have just rejected these prices and offered cheaper generics, but they didn't. So, why? The answer lies in something called a shadow pharmacy. Basically, it's a pharmacy that looks totally independent to the outside world, to doctors, patients, and especially insurers. But in reality, it's secretly owned and controlled by the drug manufacturer itself. Its entire reason for existing is to serve the manufacturer, not the patient. And Valeant's shadow pharmacy had a name, Philidor RX Services. For the longest time, nobody knew that Valeant secretly owned and controlled it. And this single deception, well, it was the key to their entire empire. So here's how Philidor worked its magic. When a doctor prescribed a generic, its staff would sometimes literally alter the prescription to force Valeant's expensive drug instead. They had entire playbooks on how to resubmit rejected insurance claims over and over and over again until they were approved, essentially bullying the system into paying. They made it nearly impossible for patients to get the cheaper drugs they were supposed to. But listen, an empire that's built on deception like this, it just can't last forever. The entire scheme was a house of cards, and it was about to come tumbling down in the most dramatic way you can imagine. And here's the thing, the whole operation wasn't uncovered by the FDA or the SEC, the big regulators. No, it was a short-selling firm, Citron Research, that started digging around. They published a now famous report asking a very simple question. Is this the Enron of pharma? And that report, that was the beginning of the end. And it all just unraveled so fast. In October 2015, the report drops. The stock immediately starts to plummet. Then, pretty soon after, Congress gets involved, hauling CEO Mike Pearson in for these televised hearings. Suddenly, the whole world was getting a look at their playbook. The financial carnage was just unbelievable.
From that peak of $90 billion, the company's value just evaporated. In about a year, it had lost 90% of its worth. Billions upon billions of dollars in investor wealth, gone.
Poof.
So what happened after the collapse? I mean, what was the real fallout? Well, it was immense. And not just for the company, but for the key players who had championed this thing as the future of medicine. Just look at this number for a second. $4 billion. That's billion with a B. And yeah, that minus sign is definitely there for a very specific reason.
That was the estimated loss that Bill Ackman's hedge fund suffered. He had bet big, I mean really big, on Valeant, defending the company right up until the bitter end. It went down as one of the most disastrous hedge fund trades in history.
The broader consequences were just as severe. Everyday investors lost their life savings. Executives from that shadow pharmacy, Philidor, ended up facing federal charges for fraud. And really, the whole scandal forced a global conversation about price gouging and corporate greed in the pharmaceutical industry. Which, of course, leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling question. Sure, Valeant and Philidor were exposed, but was the underlying weakness in the system that allowed them to thrive in the first place ever truly fixed? Or could another company with another secret do it all over again?